Welcome to Let's Talk Business Phoenix, the Greater Phoenix Chambers podcast. I'm your host, Todd Sanders, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. Each week, we tackle key issues affecting businesses, the community, and state, aiming to drive growth and overcome challenges while uniting community leaders to move Phoenix forward.
Let's Talk Business Phoenix was produced in partnership with Ideas Collide, an agency offering a full suite of custom marketing solutions for your brand's unique challenges. Make a connection at ideascollide.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. We have a very exciting show and a special guest today. We have the director of the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, Dr. Nader Sanai. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and I guess I mean that literally because you were doing surgeries this morning and this afternoon and still made time for us. So appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I operate about 5 to 10 patients a week, so it's a daily occurrence.
And daily occurrence for you, but probably life-changing for the folks that you're working with, which is tremendous, and we're going to get into some of that. But I'd like to give the folks out there an opportunity to get to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then perhaps something that we wouldn't see on your bio.
Sure. I was born in Tehran. I came out to California at a young age, just about the time when elementary school was starting.
Okay.
Moved to Palo Alto, which is just outside of Stanford. My dad is a mechanical engineer, so he was working at a sort of a think tank adjacent to Stanford on defense work, and so he brought us out. I grew up in the Bay Area, went to school in California, ultimately did my medical school at UCSF, my residency in neurosurgery at UCSF, and that took me to about 2009. And at that point, ready to go out, start a practice, build a career. And unexpectedly, there was an opportunity to do some additional training, what's called a clinical fellowship, with the previous founder and director of the Barrow Neurological Institute, Dr. Robert Spetzler. So Dr. Spetzler being probably one of the most accomplished neurosurgeons of the modern era, I didn't hesitate.
Of course.
I came out here for a year intending to leave after that year and go to one of the coasts to a university-based position. But to be honest, I had no familiarity and had never been to Phoenix. I really didn't know what to expect.
Kind of a flyover state for you, it sounds like, at that point.
Absolutely. At that point, I had no friends here. I simply came out here for the training opportunity, and once I arrived, I was just shocked with the opportunity, the possibilities here, the scale of what he had built at the Barrow. My ambitions were always to go to a university-based medical center and help build or improve a brain tumor program. That was what I was specializing in, and I realized then with Dr. Spetzler that there was a unique opportunity in Phoenix to build something inimitable. And I never looked back. I've been here for 16 years.
And quite a journey. Now, tell us, before we move on, something about you that maybe we wouldn't see on your bio.
Well, I don't list on my bio my fanaticism for tennis.
Okay. We just had Wimbledon.
Which I was at very briefly. So, yes, I live and breathe that sport in the odd hours of the day and play it in the odd hours of the day. And my whole family actually does. So for us, it's a parallel way of life.
Nice relief.
Yeah, really is. A great sport.
And what a final, right?
Incredible.
Amazing.
Incredible. Repeat of the French Open final. And, just the drama between these two who are clearly in another tier than everyone else. So I was there for the quarterfinals. I had been invited by the president of the Scottish Tennis Association, who I had randomly met on a tennis court at a conference in Scotland. And it was a privilege.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. And so many people share that. And I'm assuming not too many parallels with sort of the new phenomenon, obviously, pickleball.
Yeah, I don't say that word out loud, but yeah, I haven't tried it. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a great sport, probably, but not for me.
Not for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So interesting. Your dad, mechanical engineer. You decided to take you didn't go into the family business. Went into medicine. What was that spark for you that interested you in medicine?
Yeah, first person in my family in medicine. I think, my father is, an analytical guy and works primarily in things related to physics. But early on in my life, my mother's sister developed a brain tumor called a glioblastoma. This is sort of a spontaneous occurrence that can happen at any point in life, and she was in her 20s. I was a bit older at that point, and certainly was watching this drama unfold in my family and watching her slip away. And it was a terrifying and heavily destabilizing experience for a very tight-knit and larger family. And I think it planted a seed that I wanted to be part of the solution for that. And in fact, there was a neurosurgeon who was the chair of neurosurgery at UCLA at the time. His name was Eugene Stern. He's since retired. But really, even at 10, 12 years of age, I could see that...
that young, man.
Yeah, I was young. Yeah, I could see this when this gentleman entered the room. All of the uncertainty and chaos and emotional tumult that my family was feeling was sort of stabilized. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated that, and I aspired to that, and I think that as I went on through college and medical school, that stayed with me.
Well, it sounds like in many cases you're meeting with people in that same situation, probably the most terrifying parts of their lives, and you're coming in and you're that calming influence that says, okay, let's tackle the problem.
I try to be. I think there's a special privilege to intersecting with someone when they're in their darkest moment. There's also a special responsibility. People handle that moment differently, and so there's an EQ you need to be able to navigate that for different families. But, it's an honor to be helpful in those moments. And what I try to do is really provide a sense of calm, a sense of hope, and then, like my father's, sort of adherence to science and method, a process so that people can have structure in this really chaotic, highly fluid moment.
Absolutely. Well, I think we in our daily lives, we don't tend to run into too many neurosurgeons. And we talked about the fact that you actually did several surgeries this morning and today. Don, what does the day in the life look like? It sounds like maybe some tennis somewhere in there, but what else is involved in that kind of day?
It can start early with tennis. You know, I think in the summer months of Arizona, if you're a tennis player, that means you're up around 4 and on the courts at 5.
That's true.
Or you're playing, 9 or 10 at night. So that can happen, and I think it's a nice way for me to really clean the table in terms of the clutter in my mind and stay focused on this yellow ball. So I love those moments.
Almost meditative.
It is, yeah. It's definitely centering, and I think the complexities that are ahead of me in the day, are sort of prefaced by that. But then very shortly after that, I found myself in the operating room. And, these are patients that have their individual journeys. These are patients who have family members that have been anticipating this moment, praying over it, hand-wringing over it. And, I think about that as I go through these operations. I think about the patient, and for some of my operations, the patients are awake.
Because they have to react for you.
Yeah, they have to be speaking so that I can test their language function. That's one of my specializations, is what's called language mapping. So, the relationship is very real. And for me, there's really no objectification of the process, which can be a strategy for some surgeons to make it a purely technical exercise. Sure. But for me, it's a very human experience and requires focus, just like on the tennis court. Everything else filters out, the ambient noise is gone, you're in the moment.
In the zone.
And you're basically very goal-oriented. And at the same time, you're thinking about the consequences of your choices. And, what I talk to patients about before we go into the operating room is, look, I'm going to be in there making some decisions on your behalf. And they're going to be lifelong consequences of those decisions. So let's talk about what your priorities are, what your life is like, what you're willing to risk and what you're not willing to risk. And those things are baked into the surgical strategy. So, that's one dimension of my life. And then, of course, the other dimension of my life, which also unfolds during the course of the day, is the Ivy Brain Tumor Center and the drug development that I do, which is more of an exercise in science, but very much intertwined with those patients.
Well, absolutely. And I will say I find it comforting and I'm astounded that while you're doing all of this and you're actually in a procedure, you're actually thinking about the patient and thinking about those priorities. And I think it says a lot, and certainly why people trust you with some of these. You are their agent at some point to make some of these big decisions. You mentioned the fact that you have a few other roles. How do you balance sort of the neurosurgeon side of the equation along with the clinician and sort of administrative side of the work that you do?
Well, for me, one dimension energizes the other. I think my nature is, someone who enjoys multiplicity. And, there's a motivational aspect to it. My operations are as effective as I can make them, but they're not wholly effective. They're not curative. So if I want to be part of the solution for these patients, I'm going to have to drift into other dimensions beyond the operative domain. And that's how drug development came about. At the same time, as a human being, I think there's importance to the variety of thought. Yeah. And, the intellectual process and the physical process of a surgical procedure or a clinical visit is quite apart from the scientific method and the hypothesis testing of translational research. And I've always been interested in science and biology and research, and I've always conducted that in parallel, even during my training at San Francisco. Marrying the two can be a bit of a challenge, and certainly it effectively means you're running two careers at once. But if it makes you happy, and I'm 16 years into it and feel no less engaged than I was in year one, no less motivated, I'm not encountering any sort of doldrums of mid-career, so I think it's the right formula for me.
Absolutely. When you talk about 16 years, I mean, certainly it probably feels very quick.
Yeah.
But when you look back at that time and where this field has come, what are some of the biggest advances that you've seen in that time?
Yeah. I wish there have been a lot, to be honest. When my aunt passed away, which was decades ago, I'm 49 years old, so many decades ago. The median survival for her type of tumor, glioblastoma, meaning on average, was about 12 to 14 months. And today, decades and decades later, and you think about all the progress in society since that time, it's 14 to 16 months.
Okay.
So there certainly hasn't been enough progress. In the 16 years, I think what has really changed has been this Phoenix community around me, the community of scientists and clinicians that we've built at the Ivy Center and at the Barrow Neurological Institute. I think that we're far more mature and poised to make a transformative change than we were 16 years ago. But I find myself unsettled with the past 16 years of progress and wanting more and faster in the next few. So that's where my focus has always been.
Thank you. Well, you're obviously very reflective and philosophical. Thinking about your role, what's your leadership style? How do you see leadership, and how would the folks under you describe your style?
Well, I think everyone will recognize that I'm passionate and lead by example. I believe in work ethic, and I try to reflect that in my day. I believe in scientific creativity and risk-taking. We try to reflect that in our approach towards these patients and towards the science of finding new drugs for them. I believe in youth and idealism. The Ivy Brain Tumor Center has about 55 full-time employees. The vast majority of them are under 30. These are young men and women who are here for a reason, in many cases, not because they're from here or needed to work here, but rather because they were attracted to the concept of a high risk, high reward program, something where it has the potential to make major inroads in a short period of time. As I always tell them, come here with me and let's take a shot at the title. What do you have to lose? You could stay where you are. If you're a faculty member at some coastal university medical center, you're talented, you'll inevitably rise, you'll be on textbooks, you'll ultimately become a division chief or chair. But we're out here trying to cure something.
Much different.
Much different. We're out here laser focused on the singular objective that I think really matters when it comes to your career, your legacy, your life's work, which is changing the reality for patients before and after you came into the picture. So, there's a lot of ambition baked into my leadership, and I think that what that requires is a lot of trust in others. We want the men and women in our program to push the limits of their own capabilities, to rise up within the organization, to acquire new skill sets, to even acquire new job titles and new specializations. I believe that pedigree is important, but perhaps more important than that is really your ambition, your work ethic, and your ability to think creatively.
It sounds like, though, you're not afraid to make room for people coming up.
No, absolutely
not. That can be a little threatening for folks, especially mid-career, but you're inviting them up.
I was telling my wife this the other day. I believe that people with talent really should maximize their talents. I don't consider myself to be extraordinarily talented. I try to maximize what I have. But there are people around me in this organization that are more talented than me and have probably more potential than I do. I would be unhappy, and I have been unhappy with friends, for example, that haven't maximized their talents. So I want to see that in them. For me, the personal element of it is really not a factor.
Well, it sounds like that's what makes you a good leader.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope so.
I know people hear about the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, and they might have sort of heard it in passing, but maybe give us a little bit of background on the center and maybe its founding and where it's going.
Sure. To encapsulate it, the Ivy Brain Tumor Center is simply here to find new therapies for patients with brain cancer. That is our sole singular goal. The genesis of it really came from me earlier in my career basically reaching a little bit of an inflection point where I had been here for 5 or 6 years. I was running a clinical practice. I was running a laboratory working on more basic science. And everything was successful on paper. My CV looked good. Mm-hmm. In my world, that means getting grants, getting high-profile publications, getting invitations to speak, getting patients to come. But I probably was at a low point in terms of my happiness and, at times flirted with depression simply because I'm seeing these patients in clinic and there's nothing I can do for them.
We're still at 16 months.
Exactly. We're still there. And I'm trying my hardest and I'm, living and dying in the operating room with them every day. And I just don't have any solutions to offer them. And my research, while important for the greater good and maybe down the line could lead to something, was not imminently leading to something. So I sort of paused a bit and just looked around the world and realized that, this lack of progress is almost singular to neuro-oncology, to brain tumor cancer research. Outside of that, in general oncology, there have been amazing developments. There are melanomas today that were incurable when I started practice in 2010 and now are totally curable. Subtypes of lung cancer, breast cancer, same thing. Incredible, inspirational advancements.
So really quantifiable.
Quantifiable
changes.
And very much happening over a short period of time. So I decided in that moment that I'm going to have to be part of that solution, and if that means me learning an entirely new discipline of drug development and the science and the business and the biology of that, then that is what I was going to do. And so the concept of the Ivy Center was simply to focus on that. It took, of course, the investment of others, the confidence of others, and ultimately my meeting Catherine Ivy and her Ben and Catherine Ivy Foundation to really catalyze the program.
So, it's interesting when you first talked about your journey, and you hear this, Phoenix and Arizona were sort of a flyover, but it sounds like in many ways the center is putting Arizona on the map. Maybe talk to us about how maybe that's changing sort of the way medicine and the community is looking at Arizona.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's putting it on the map, because I think Arizona, is very much on the map. I think that what we did was perhaps prove this thesis that Arizona has incredible potential in many domains, including biotech drug delivery and academic medicine. And the simple thesis of it was, when I got here, was, look, there's incredible demographics in Arizona. Phoenix is one of the largest cities in the country. And there's a patient population here that's certainly in need of medical care, just like any large patient population around the country. So that is very much, in drug development terms, the substrate. What you need to combine to that is the science. And I think what we know now is different from 30, 40 years ago, is that science is portable. You don't need to be in any particular location to perform good science, especially today. It's decentralized. Many of our most important collaborators aren't even in this country. So where you are located is less important than what kind of environment you have around you to support that. And this is an incredibly ambitious community. I think that some of the concepts that underpin the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, concepts like collaborating with biotech and biopharma, but not asking for intellectual property rights or financial associations. Concepts like taking patients with incurable disease and really pushing them into aggressive experimental therapies. These kinds of ethos, I think, work well within Arizona.
Yes.
This is an ambitious, and I would venture to say, risk-taking community that, very much comes to the table with very few pretenses. I think that in some of these more establishment communities on the coast, for example, there's an intransigence because of historical precedent, because of, generations of people that have preceded trying to do similar things. And in Phoenix, I just saw none of that. I saw a lot of intelligent, ambitious, self-made individuals, many of whom you've met on this podcast. And these men and women understand that what really matters is the ideas that you have and how hard you are willing to work for it. And if they see that, they back it.
It is kind of what you see here, isn't it? It is true. I hear that a lot from people. And to your point about pedigree, it's not necessarily where'd you go to school, who are your parents, but what are you willing to do?
That's right.
So
what are you willing to do? What are you doing? And I just love that. It's, there's an equalizing element to it. It's not hierarchical. It fits our ethos within the Ivy Center. We're not very hierarchical. And I think that lends itself to agility and innovation.
Well, and you mentioned treatments. I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I think 2 elections ago we passed the right to try legislation that allowed people that were in a situation where they needed to try something to do that here. Right.
So important. I think recognizing that, look, when you're faced with an incurable disease or something that's threatening your life, the tables are tilted. Yeah. There's really no time to be twiddling about. You need to go for it. And as I often tell our patients, the best thing you can do is get on experimental therapy. Even if it's not effective, at the bare minimum, what it means is you're going to have a bunch more eyeballs on you. Mm-hmm. And because more people are paying attention to you, research nurses, coordinators, whatever, you're going to do better. If something goes off kilter, someone's going to sound the alarm.
So they're going to know.
And we're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And so, and we see that in the data. even for completely negative clinical trials, on average, those patients do better than the average population.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So talking about clinical trials, and certainly they're complicated, they're very time consuming. You've got an innovative approach to those trials that really compresses, for instance, the time frame down. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
That's right. Thank you. So if you ask yourself, why is it that we're not curing brain tumors, for example? There's a few, well-established answers. The first is that most drugs don't make it into the brain. The brain is designed to keep things out because that's how it protects itself. But that means most molecules never make it in.
Too big.
Too big, polarizing in their charge. There's a bunch of biophysical properties that determine this. But your brain is surrounded by what's called the blood-brain barrier. Sure. And this is really, really important for your health. However, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it's also a major, major problem because 99% of the molecules don't get through. So getting drugs into the brain is a singular problem. And at the same time, with other cancers, we find ways through them because we can model them. If someone has breast cancer, well, you can create biologically the exact same breast cancer in an animal model as you can in that patient. And therefore, if it works in the animal model, there's a high likelihood it'll work in that patient. And that's how drug development works, from what we call bench to bedside, as they say. But for brain cancer, we don't have any models that approximate the human condition well enough. Maybe because the human brain is so much different than any animal brain, including primates or other large animals. And so as a consequence, we continuously see signals in what we call the preclinical space, meaning the laboratory animal models, that don't bear out in humans. So the idea for us is to effectively humanize the animal model, to say, look, what really matters is what happens in this patient, not in an animal. And therefore, we're going to ask the same questions we would in an animal in this patient. And those questions boil down to, is the drug getting there? And is the drug hitting whatever target it's supposed to hit? And the way we've figured out how to do that is to say, okay, like one of my patients today, unfortunately, has a brain tumor and needs surgery. And that's a fact, and that's something we're going to plan on.
Sure.
But today is Wednesday, and on Monday and Tuesday, this patient took a couple pills. These are experimental therapies that are designed to target the biology of his tumor. Now, a couple pills is not going to cause him any side effects, and he's barely going to notice it. But after I took this tumor out today, part of it was quickly redirected to the Ivy Center laboratories. And as we record this podcast, they're working on it. And today is Wednesday, and the patient will probably be out of the hospital by Saturday. The patient will probably see me in clinic a week from Monday.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. And at that time, when I'm taking the patient's stitches out, we'll know, did this drug get to that patient's tumor? Did it hit its target? And if the answer is yes, then that patient absolutely should be on this experimental therapy.
Sure.
And if it's no, then we should pivot to something else.
And
Yeah. The challenge with drug development today is when you're in this kind of situation like this patient, and a doctor says, I have a clinical trial for you, what that unfortunately means is, I have a drug that I think might work. I really don't know if it will. I need you to trust me. I need you to take this drug for several months. We're going to cross our fingers, and hopefully the scans in a couple of months will look good. And unfortunately, they often don't. And those months are precious.
The time is gone.
The time is the most important commodity. So we eliminate that part, and we get, biological answers rather than correlative answers to whether a drug is effective. And this has been a very effective way of accelerating drug development.
Almost like a just-in-time model.
It's exactly just like that, a just-in-time model. And then, look, the other part of this equation is these drugs are not from us. Drug development today doesn't happen in academic medical centers or universities. Drug development happens in industry. It happens in biotech and biopharma. And these companies have shareholders, they have stakeholders, they have business models, and unfortunately brain cancer doesn't fit into those models very well. The market size for most brain cancers is around, at best, $1 billion to $2 billion. And for most of these companies, that's not in the ballpark of what justifies the investments that they're making.
The R&D investments they would have.
The R&D investments,
Yeah.
exactly. So we have to have, in addition to this scientific approach, an approach for these companies that make business sense to them. And our approach is simply this. You're a company X and you have drug A, B, or C that we think may be of value to this patient population. We know you didn't make it for them. You made it for breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate. That's fine. We know that it's a risk for you to test the drug in these patients. It'll cost you money, and if something bad happens, that may affect your approval process for these other indications. So we will take all the risk for you. You allow us to use this drug. We will design the trial. We will complete the trial. We will pay for the trial. We will take all of the intellectual property rights and all of the data rights of our work and convey it to you wholly, no strings attached. And we'll do this all in months so that by the time you have your next shareholder meeting, you can report on this. And if we find something positive, well, then that gives you an opportunity to accelerate that drug's development. And conversely, if the drug's not effective in this space, that information is equally valuable, and you can shut it down. And so we give this proposition to companies to somewhat tilt the playing field towards our patients.
Right. Well, you're cutting the risk out for them while providing benefit across the board on the patient side.
We're trying to de-risk the science and de-risk the finance.
So, I know everyone's talking about artificial intelligence these days, but I'm assuming that given the data that's coming out and all the modeling you're doing, that this could also be an interesting tool for you to use in brain tumor research.
AI is going to be important in every dimension of science, I believe, and cancer research is no exception. Every major biopharma right now already has an AI program, and there are biotechs that entirely are built on AI backbones. AI can be used in a variety of ways in medicine. You can use it to design molecules, like the AlphaFold project, where they literally design proteins that you couldn't design otherwise in a cost and time efficient way. And you can use it to predict results and predict success, drug screening, as we call it, drug discovery. So all of those things are baked into our approach, and more importantly, they're baked into the industry. So we're embracing it. We're leaning into that. I think that with the pace of progress we see today, it's going to become part and parcel to our industry, and we think that it's very much a democratizing effect in the field, meaning that this kind of technology is going to reduce costs ultimately. And that means a lot more for a small market indication like brain cancer than it necessarily does for a blockbuster indication like prostate or lung.
Breast cancer.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm assuming, too, other countries are going to be able to benefit from this as well. I mean, you mentioned Iran. I mean, I'm from Colombia originally, so you're going to see a democratization in terms of access to in other countries.
We are already expanding our footprint. So part of our thesis is we'll work with these companies to find a promising agent. If we do, we will similarly help them take that agent all the way to approval, which means a global study.
Sure.
So the first company that we really proved this thesis with was a biopharmaceutical called GSK, which I think is headquartered in the UK, but is really a multinational, probably $80 billion market cap company. And GSK had a drug that they hadn't really developed for brain cancer, but we identified in our portfolio as something that we thought could be valuable. The drug's called niraparib. We took it through our phase 0 clinical trial program like I described, and literally months later, we had the data that would justify expanding and accelerating the drug's development, and GSK agreed. However, at the end of the day, the market size is still small, and it still costs many tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to run the type of clinical trial you need to get global approval. So again, we tried to really advocate for our patients, and we agreed with GSK that we would again be the bridge here. We would run the trial. We would be the regulatory sponsor. We would take the risk. Of course, it's their asset and their potential filing for the FDA and the EMA, so they'll pay for the study, but we won't add anything on top of it. No indirects, no additional fees, and certainly no downstream revenue points. And so this changes the business equation for GSK. It makes it easier for them to get to yes. And today, that study is underway in 13 countries at 115 medical centers. It's underway in Europe, in the UK, Australia, Canada, North America, et cetera. And we believe that this is the model for how to cost efficiently and time efficiently advance a drug all the way across the world.
But it comes back to this, the mission, the philosophy of a patient-centric
Absolutely.
approach.
Absolutely. We are doing this for one singular reason. We understand the business of the field well enough. So we want these companies to be successful. We want to equip them with the tools and data that will make their stakeholders happy and encourage the field to invest more. But from our perspective, that motivation is still born out of the desire to get patients more options.
You mentioned glioblastoma, and I know you're in a study right now. I think it's phase 3 of a study. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? It sounds like there's some promising answers there or some research.
Absolutely. So, a phase 3 study is the final level of a clinical trial, and it's really when you do what's called randomization, meaning half the patients will get the drug, half the patients will not. It's an incredibly complicated process to unfold because there's a high degree of regulatory complexity, especially if you're doing it in multiple countries. For us, though, this has been a necessity because, again, within the community of drug development worldwide, there's different pathways to getting to a phase 3. And for brain cancer, the two pathways are the company themselves can run the trial, or you can do what's called a consortium study, where there's a constellation of academic medical centers that band together to run the trial. Both those options, though, are somewhat inefficient for different reasons. Reasons of scale, of bureaucracy, complexity, politics. The Ivy Center has none of that. We are institutionally agile. We are fast-moving, highly malleable, and we can easily add functionality when we need it. So with this clinical trial called the GlioFocus trial, which is a global phase 3 for newly diagnosed glioblastoma patients, we deploy all of those resources to bear, and it's helped us really move at record pace. Again, this is a patient population that does not have time to wait. I'm sure many of my patients would be happy in a global way if there was a solution for their disease 5 years from now, but they may not be around to enjoy it. So we need answers within months, and that's what the GlioFocus trial does.
More to come.
Exactly.
So you mentioned agility, speed, and certainly a different way of doing business. For the leaders watching today, what are some of the lessons that they can apply to their institutions that you're working on today?
Well, I think in medicine in particular, there can be levels of intransigence and bureaucracy that could hinder innovation. And baking innovation into medicine is really what everybody's focus should really be. You look at artificial intelligence, for example, and there are many, many different applications for it, and all of them have their merits. But ultimately, the ultimate application, I think, for any AI platform is going to be science and medicine. And whichever platforms get to that faster is where you're going to see just world-changing results. So medicine, and in particular science of medicine and the translational research of medicine, has to be prepared to receive that. I think that what we've learned at the Ivy Center is, number one, sometimes you have to just build everything from the ground up. I drive a Tesla, like many people, and when you drive that car, you realize that this was not built on a lot of precedent.
Yeah.
It was a reconceived automobile from the ground up, and for that reason, they sidestepped many of the historical challenges of that engineering, and they invented new paths that didn't exist before. That's what we've done with the Ivy Center. We built a drug development program in an academic medical center from the ground up, partly because we had never done it before, and sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
Partly because we probably didn't know any better in terms of the risks we were taking, and because we had stakeholders like the Ivy Foundation that were willing to back those risks. But in the end, the product is something quite different from the establishment. And I think that academic medical centers, large and small, hospitals, large and small, would do well to embrace that. Historical precedent is important, but it can be limiting.
Yeah, it can make you sort of stop innovating.
That's right.
I think one of the other things that I think paralyzes all of us is the fear of failure. Mm-hmm. But without failure, you don't learn. How do you treat failure? I mean, failure is kind of a high stakes thing for you, but how do you treat that, and for you and your team?
I don't treat it well. I don't like to fail. I think our team has similar motivations. We don't let it discourage us. We let it fuel us. Look, we're in the field of drug development. Most of these drugs fail. And so the important thing there is to learn from that opportunity and to make sure you don't repeat it the next time, and to make sure that you're adapting. And that's what's happening. That evolution of our business is fueled by failure. But, look, as I mentioned, I play a lot of tennis. I'm competitive. A lot of my colleagues in science and medicine are similarly competitive, not necessarily with each other, but with themselves, with the disease. I view it as an adversarial relationship, myself and this disease, that began decades ago and continues. There will be losses, but the war will be won, and we remain sort of steadfast trained on that.
Well, I hesitate to ask you my final question, but I'll ask it anyway because I think it's obvious. But where do you want to see the Ivy Center in your work in 10 years?
My hope is that it won't be quite so singular, that it will be replicated in philosophy, in organization, and importantly, that it will be attributed to a cure to not just glioblastoma, but the many other malignant brain tumors that exist, and we work on all of them. For me, this is all about creating an inflection in this disease and the experience of these patients. We want to be part of that solution in any way possible. So, we're here for that. We believe that that's the reason we exist, and I think that for our patients, they need it.
Well, and it takes me back to that 11-year-old boy that saw something and decided that you wanted to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Still here.
Yep.
Still here, still living it every day. When you're a neurosurgeon and you're a brain tumor surgeon, you take a lot of losses. It is part and parcel to your experience. You meet patients that are lovely, wonderful people who really, quite frankly, don't necessarily know what's in store for them. You do, because you've seen it. And your job is for history not to repeat itself. But it can, and it does. And you have to have the ability to take yourself back to why you were doing it every day so that you do it again. There is a little bit of, short-term sort of ism to that. But I think that it's the only way to get through a career like that. Otherwise, I think it's too crushing to see so much human loss.
You bet. Well, we're glad that you're in our corner. And
I
thank you
appreciate
for
that.
all the incredible work you're doing, not only for Phoenix, obviously, or Arizona, but for the United States and for the entire world. It's meaningful, and I'm hoping in 10 years when we're talking again that you'll say, well, we did it.
I think we will, and I think then we'll be recognizing Phoenix as the epicenter of CNS oncology drug development worldwide, as it's starting to become recognized now.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for being with us. We'll do a quick lightning round with you. We're gonna lighten it up a little bit. Go to your first job. What was your first non-professional job?
Yeah, I was a assistant at a farmer's market. We sold strawberries. I was in high school. I really had no idea how to do that job, and the proprietor let me go. And I quickly realized that if you're a young boy and you get let go, the beehive of mothers and friends
Yes.
of mothers will buzz. And so, before I knew it, nobody was buying those strawberries anymore. So I learned a valuable lesson there of loyalty, but also I also learned that I needed to step up my game.
Absolutely. Well, it was a twofer there. And then, so we're going to take it out of the normal. I have to ask then, and we're going to stay current favorite tennis player that you love to watch.
So his name is Caboli. He was in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. He's a young Italian. I think for the tennis aficionados, they'll know that obviously the number one player in the world is Italian Jannik Sinner, but there is a stable of young Italian players that for whatever reason are emerging from the country in their young 20s, and they're incredibly talented. And Caboli is one of them. So I enjoy watching him. He's very physical, he's very aggressive, which I enjoy. He's somewhat temperamental, which is entertaining.
Yeah.
But
Well,
all talents. Maybe not as far as John McEnroe, but maybe the modern millennial version.
Gotcha. And on the women's side?
Yeah, on the women's side, there is a Russian player named Putintseva who is undersized. I can't imagine she's more than 5'1", 5'2", has incredible competitive spirit. Sometimes finds herself, or maybe not so often, at odds with the player across the net, can be somewhat petulant, but there's a spirit there. And she punches above her weight.
Nice.
And I love that.
Well, she's kind of an underdog, it sounds like.
She absolutely is.
All right. All right, and then we're going to go now, we're going to back up a little bit. All-time greatest
Tennis
player. Yep.
Pete Sampras.
Pete Sampras, I got to see him.
Really?
He played here, at the Princess back in the 80s.
Wow.
Yvonne Lendl was there.
I remember Lendl.
Very cool. Yeah, Lendl. I think maybe Becker was here.
Wow.
Boris Becker was here.
I wish, we do have a super challenger here, what's called the Challenger 175, that happens in the spring.
Yeah.
So we're lucky to have that at Phoenix Country Club. But we don't get the Sampras level professionals in a tournament like that. Pete Sampras, Pistol Pete, as you recall, was a generational talent. Incredible serve.
And a decent person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Incredible human being, and I had incredible respect for him. I remember growing up wanting to be him.
Yep. Mayor, you heard that? Let's bring big league tennis here to Phoenix.
I'm ready for it.
We have some fans.
I'll buy the first ticket.
There we go. And then final question, person or book, or it can be both, that changed your life?
Well, I think I already mentioned one of the people
Yes.
who changed my life, who was Eugene Stern. But really, the other was Robert Spetzler, who, for people in Phoenix, they've probably heard the name. This is a virtuoso neurosurgeon who similarly came to Phoenix without a connection to the community and built, really with no precedent, the premier neurological institute in the country and the premier neurosurgical program in the country. And in the process, not only made incredible technical innovations in neurosurgery, but trained generations of neurosurgeons, including me. What really changed my life in meeting and working with Dr. Spetzler, who's since retired but is still around, is I realized then that you could be incredibly passionate and ambitious about your work, but there was still room to enjoy. There was still room to have balance and humanity. He was able to walk that line. In neurosurgery, so often, you have such extreme type A's that there's little room for anything else. And that one-dimensionality was what I thought was destined for me. But when I met and saw and worked with Dr. Spetzler, I realized, this is a different model. And sometimes in life, those kind of people just bend your curve, and that's what he did.
Well, ironically, that he's bending your curve, but it's also having an impact on thousands of people that you work on.
Absolutely.
So, good choice.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being with us. Thank you for the work you're doing, and we hope to have you back someday soon.
My pleasure. I hope so as well.
Great. Thanks for watching this episode of Let's Talk Business Phoenix. Please take a moment to tap the follow or subscribe button for more great podcast episodes to help your business thrive.